Welcome to the Learning League podcast. I'm your host, Cheryl Powell, owner of Learn to Engage. My guest today is Wes Love, founding partner at Culture Stoke, and one of the most honest voices I've come across on what culture actually means inside an organization. Welcome, Wes.
Hey, thank you. I am super stoked, pun fully intended to be here.
I love it. Well, Wes, I want you to set the scene for me and tell me about a situation you walked into where a team was really struggling.
Struggling is a bit of a generous, it was very I'll paint a picture for you. So I was going into my office one Wednesday morning,
Mm,
and it was a Wednesday morning like no other, and was just kind of going through my emails, and then
mm,
I got a phone call from a leader that I had been working with in a different department. I like my line of work because there's very few emergencies, but in this case, this leader typically didn't use the phone. We would communicate asynchronously,
yeah.
typically, and so when I get a phone call, it's like, okay, this feels different. So I jump on and we exchanged some pleasantries, and then she said, "Listen, I really really need your help. I am at a loss with what to do with this team that I have."
Mm,
And so I was like, "Okay, yeah, tell me more." And she said, "We're having some conflict." And as a conflict averse person, it's not my favorite thing to lean into, but I have found that it is really necessary when, particularly when the pile is small, to to
yeah.
to to squash those things out, because there are a litany of studies out there about the impacts. But financially speaking, there have been multiple studies that show that um, conflict conflict related resignations can cost have in the past cost somewhere around $16 billion. So conflict can be very expensive,
Unbelievable.
and which translates to about $1,000 per employee,
Mm,
is what they're paying, not to mention the amount of time that can be consumed. There was
yeah.
one study out there that showed that employees spend an average of 2 hours a week dealing with conflict,
Wow.
which is not an insignificant amount of time when you think of the grand scheme of things. So we took this sort of problem very, very seriously because it's
Mm,
expensive to hire people, it's expensive to bring people on, and particularly when you find good people. And so
yeah.
through a little bit of context setting with this leader, found out that this was a group that had been in conflict for some time now, to the point where it was getting beyond your typical organizational kerfuffle. There was screaming, and there was, I like to, in the moment it was very scary, but now I like to joke that they were a heartbeat away from charges being filed, because this was a team that was in crisis, not just in conflict.
Yeah.
So she said, "Hey, I could really use your help here because I am not sure what to do." And so that was the kind of the invite or the foyer into
Yeah.
that scenario.
What did they already try? Did the manager tell you at what
Yeah,
they?
so
Okay.
the typical escalation protocol, right? When you have two
Yeah.
employees that come to you and they are talking
Right.
about the other, you try and get them to talk amongst themselves, and then if that doesn't happen, then it's like, okay, well, let's get in a room to talk together. And when that doesn't happen, let's bring in an external voice. Let's run it up the chain and bring in
Yeah.
my boss's boss. And so they had ran through all those things. And the interesting part was there were five people on this team of data analysts who I really need to put this in here, were some of the kindest and most wonderful people ever
Yeah.
as individuals. But for
Mhm.
some reason, there was just a series of unfortunate events that these five people, it wasn't between two, it was a Royal Rumble style
Yeah.
um, fight where they in it. And so I think that mixed with the level of conflict that they were in, that being that there was five of them, and the level of conflict, this leader was really like, "Hey, I have tried everything. Can
Hmm.
you help?"
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you were brought in and you're looking at the people involved, these five people, and you decided to do what?
Run? No, I'm just kidding. it was I was still very young in my career. And so this was really the first time that I had dealt with a situation that was this dire before.
Right.
And, my typical mode of operations is to like, let's humanize in the room. Let's,
Yes.
go through the history and figure out, see if we can find some potential root causes and start to work
Yeah.
on resolution. But at this point, after a few, after like an initial session with the team,
Yeah.
I found that the idea of relitigating the past was something that was very unappealing to them. They
Okay.
were just exhausted with the trying to figure out who done it and whose fault and who needed to apologize for what. And so on a whim, I created this model. It wasn't a model at the time, it's a model now, but I really
Sure.
just broke these four questions, and instead of having them being reflective and trying to figure out what happened,
Yeah.
getting them to focus on what would they love to see going forward, because I
Okay.
this was a team that felt like they were very much in I don't know if you've uh skateboarded or rollerbladed at some point in your time, but there's a term
Yeah.
called a high speed wobble, which is where you get into
Oh.
a mode where you have so much forward momentum that you are
Mm.
out of control, and there's very little that you can do to fix that except for abandon ship. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what this team felt like. And so it
Mm.
was really at this crux of like, it's either we need to dissolve this group and find new spots and break them up, or we need to really empower them to remember that above all else, their ability to choose is still there. And so I posed these four questions to them, and got them thinking about, if you could paint the picture of what this team could be, what would you love to see? What would feel good? How would you like to go forward? How would you
Yeah.
like your day to be? And I will tell you that there was a couple things that happened in the room. One, you could feel this kind of like excited anticipation of like, oh wait, it doesn't always have to be like this, and
Mm.
maybe that harkened back to times before this conflict, or
Yeah.
they just saw a potential off ramp of relief to where it's like, I don't have to wake up in the morning
And
and put on
dread.
in dread, and putting on my battle rattle, as it were, and like getting
Yeah.
ready for
Yeah.
a fight. Like, what if I could like actually look forward to coming in the office? So you could see
Yeah.
there was like a enthusiasm for what could be. And then
Yeah.
you also started to really see like the creative empowerment of like, and I can actually make these changes. Like, I can
Mm.
own my own behavior, and in that we can own our behavior collectively and really shape
Yeah.
what kind of dawned on me after the fact was like, this was the
Yeah.
team's culture. And so
Yeah.
it was a very cool exercise.
Wow. And those 4 points
Hmm.
um became, you said, a model
Hmm.
I'm sure you've polished since then.
Uh, it's interesting because the questions that I posed really didn't change, but when I walked away and really started to think about it,
Mm.
I really was like, these questions are actually, and it's a gross oversimplification of what culture is, but it definitely makes culture a lot more actionable for the people
Yeah.
who live it and breathe it every day. And so,
Yeah.
through happenstance or whatnot, like these questions were, how do we treat each other? So if we think about our team or our organization,
Hmm.
and we're looking inwardly, it's the interactions and the behaviors, the observable acts that we see with one another.
Yeah.
Like, how do we do that? And this can be
Yeah.
with the work execution, but also the things that surround the work, the attitudes and the engagement that we have. And that was a really powerful question for that group, because
Yeah.
they had never been posed the question of how would you like to treat one another. Like, they knew how they
Mm.
had been, but really it was like, most people don't want to come in and be in constant conflict with their coworkers. We spend a
Yeah.
lot of time at work. And so when posing it to them of like, how would you like to treat each other? They were like, well, I'd love to be able to say good morning. Like, I'd love to be able to um, pose an idea without it being dismissed immediately, and starting to put that stuff out. And what you really found was a lot of alignment. Like, I'd like that too. And so
Hmm.
it was very cool, to start with the kind of inter-focused question of how do we want to treat each other. And then the other questions were just kind of bolt on from there.
I love that.
Thank
I
you.
love that. Yeah, they had more in common than they thought. That's
Hmm.
really good. And forgive me, you put this in model into a complete book. Is that correct? I
I
kn-
did.
I know you're modest, but what? Tell me, tell me again the name of it. Is it Stoked or is it Culture?
It is Culture Catalyst is the title
Ah,
of
the
the book, and
catalyst.
it has a very tongue-in-cheek subheading of the revolutionary rethinking of our workplace.
Okay.
And yeah, it is a book centered around giving organizations and their people a common language around what culture is and why it's important and why it should matter. And then it has a like follow-on chapters of like how you actually can go about shaping culture. So you can
Okay.
you can decide what you want it to look, act, and feel like,
Yeah.
but then it felt incomplete. So later on down the road I was getting a lot of like, well, how do I do this? And so really assessing kind of what makes humans and civilization work is like rules, and so you need to have organizational infrastructure in place, but then that makes a house. But how do you make a house a home, which is what the
Mm,
differentiators for culture are? And it really centered around building a spirit of gratitude, which is for individuals to be appreciated for not just what they do, but
hmm.
how they go about doing it. And so, are they performing and behaving in a way that's aligned with the culture that you're trying to build? And so, building that spirit of gratitude, like I like to say, recognizing people doing the right things rightly,
Yeah.
um, and then the second part of how you shape or the third part of how you shape culture is building a spirit of celebration, which is has a lot of facets in psychology about why
I'm
taking that
sure.
time to reflect and celebrate is really important. But what I found to be most interesting is that it reaffirms or it closes the loop about why it's important to behave this way in the first place. And so if you really
Mm,
want to shape culture, you set the expectations. Here's what I want, here's why it's important, and here's
yeah.
how we're going to go about doing it. You
Right.
start to recognize people who do that. And then when you reflect and you're able to point to the results and say, look at all this cool stuff that we're doing and look at how much we've improved over the year, it reminds people of why it's important to behave that way in the first place.
In the
Uh,
first place. Yes.
yeah.
I love that little. I think I have a couple of sound bites from what you just said, but I love how do you make the house a home? I love that.
Oh,
You
thank you.
have the foundation, but how do you make the house a home? That was really good.
Oh, thanks.
Really good.
I tell my wife that she really has made our house a home because it is,
Yeah.
when you think about a house, like the layout is kind of what it is, and
Yeah.
the forms and the foundations and the framing kind
Right.
of differentiate what rooms go and what room serves what utility. And that's really like when I think of organizations, that's your
Yeah.
rules and your infrastructure. But it's like, the color and the paint on the walls and the art and do you have plants? Do you not have plants? Is it carpet? Is it hardwood? Like those are the things that differentiate
Hmm.
home. And that's where I see where culture plays, because like you could have two engineering firms or restaurants or hospitals or government
Right.
buildings right next to each other that could look the
Yeah.
same way, but will
Yeah.
have vastly different vibes.
Yes. Yes. That is fascinating. So going back to the team,
Hmm.
um, I know that they, obviously they felt better. They were not dreading coming to work every day. What other things did you see shift?
Yeah, what was really funny is how quickly they realized they didn't need me for this, which I thought was great. Because
Mm.
my going into becoming a consultant, I was very ambivalent on this because I have my thoughts and feels about consultants and consultancy as a whole. I feel like there is a pretty earned reputation
Yeah.
that comes along with that. And so I was very like, I don't really want to do this, but I have found that when I make it my goal to work myself out of a job, I
Hmm.
feel much better about it. So I get very pumped up when I have teams say, "Hey, we love you and you've helped us a lot, but we kind of feel like we got this and we really don't need you." Like that's a celebratory moment for me.
That really, yes, yes, it would be for me too.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so this team, we had a couple of meetings and it was just a lot of like, They would just like I hate to simplify it this much, but just like any sort of work execution plan, you have your plan and then you go work your plan and then you look at your plan versus actual and say, how do we do? I don't want to put human behavior in the same sort of vein as project execution, but that's really
Right.
the strategy that we worked on is like we said we wanted to, and we focused on one specific behavior that they wanted to improve. So it was,
Yeah.
the first one I believe was not talking over each other in meetings. They were like, they found that
Mhm.
universally, like they didn't want to do that to one another, but found themselves stuck in a rut for doing that. And so they just worked on that for a couple of weeks. And then
Right.
we would see how that went and how that was going and talked about not just were we able to comply with that new rule we set in place, but how do we feel about it and do we feel like it's moving us in the right direction? And then they'd pick another behavior and they were just stacking those very small wins. And it got to the point where they were running the meeting themselves and they kind of knew
Yeah.
what I was asking for. And so I just noticed that like my presence became a lot more like a piece of art on the wall that was not really involved in the
Right.
conversation to the point where I
Yeah.
said, "Hey, how do you all feel about like your and like the thing that was most gratifying for me
Hmm.
was, they were like, we feel like we got our team back, was the general
Yeah.
sentiment.
Yeah.
And so like that was what you saw. It was kind of they were up and to the right behaviorally and also
Yeah.
results wise to the
That's what
point
I
where
was going to
they
ask. Results. Yeah. What were the results? I'm sure your productivity went up. You were closing
hmm
out projects successfully.
hmm Yeah, I mean they're the I'm always gonna lean. This is where I get myself into trouble because I am like, yeah, the results were great, but I know those are important. But why I got into this work is not for better business results. It was to make people's
Sure.
lives better. And so, yes, they were able to. They saw drastic, reduction in absenteeism, which was a problem. You wake up and you're like, well, I could either stay in bed today and burn a sick day, or I can go and hang out with a bunch of people I'm not enthusiastic to be around.
Yeah, I
Uh,
totally
they
forgot about that. The attendance. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
it is a pretty there was a where was the
I could
stat
see
that I was
that.
looking at? Um Teams with in the bottom quartile of engagement, which a one predictor of engagement is level of team dynamics, like saw
Okay.
a 78% more absenteeism than highly engaged teams. And so,
Oh,
it's not a direct one-to-one because this is really more about engagement than it is about
sure.
conflict. However, I kind of look at that like rectangle and square, like all squares are
Yeah.
rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares sort of deal. Like
Right.
if I'm having conflict with my team, the likelihood that I'm engaged is probably pretty low. So they were having some pretty substantial absenteeism issues, which causes a lot of impacts. And then after people started to feel better about the workplace, they started to see absenteeism go back to like a normal baseline of what it should be. And projects, not just execution, but quality went up. But
Okay.
the so, all of those results were up and to the right, which is the outcome that you would expect for a team that starts to work well together. But, what I really saw and heard and am connected with some of these folks still today, is, like just seeing the light and the fervor in which they approach their workplace, which is why the
Yeah.
revolutionary rethinking of our workplace. It's not really revolutionary to think if we get along and we don't necessarily have to like each other, but we develop a spirit of care for one another.
Yes.
Like all of a sudden, life is better. We're getting better results at work, and people are living better lives,
Yes.
not in spite of their work, but because of it. That's where I find the real wins.
Yes. And care, the word care that you just used, it's
hmm
more than just respect.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just goes so much deeper than
Well, and
that.
I have to remind people, because like because I think respect is one thing, care is another, but people will conflate care and like.
Yeah.
Like you don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to like somebody to care
That's
about
right.
them.
That's right.
Liking
That's
somebody is
right.
I'd love to spend more time with you and we have shared and aligned values and we like
Right.
the same subjects and we enjoy the same movies and things like that. Caring is like, I want good things for you. I want
Yeah.
you to be happy and I want you to be successful. I want you to, I want all your endeavors to be fruitful. I don't want you to
Yeah.
come to harm. that's not a huge ask for
That's
our
right.
workplaces and for our people. But without
Yeah.
that level of care, the likelihood that you're going to have an effective team is pretty low.
Yeah, because they're not going to collaborate to achieve, positive results together.
Mm-mm.
They're not
Mm-mm.
going to, if they can't care about one another, they're not going to work together
Nope.
to create positive results. That's just the bottom line. They just are on two different paths.
Yeah. I mean, the kind of motivational cat poster way of putting that is you don't want a team of high performers, you want a high performing team.
Yes,
And the contrast between those two is really stark, because if you
it
have a
is.
team that is only in it for themselves, they
That's
might
right.
be individually functional and better, but you will
Mhm.
find that they will treat resources like a game of hungry, hungry hippos. You will find that there will be a lot of, there's nobody's watching anybody's back in that. I call this the Kendrick Lamar, like, ain't nobody praying for me sort of vibe that you can get on a team, where it's like,
Yeah,
if you're not looking, if I don't think you're looking out for me, I'm not going to look
yeah,
out for you.
that's
And
right.
now we're in constant suspicion mode, where work feels a lot more like a poker game, where I'm going to hold my cards and try to bluff so I can win, versus finding ways that we can win together.
Yes, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Wes, for any leaders that are listening right now who knows that their team is struggling, but they're not sure where to start, any advice for them?
Uh, my initial answer is start in the mirror, um, which
Oh,
which is
okay.
you know what, like this is just World by West. You can kind of take it or leave it, but
No, I get it.
the
I mean, either they hit the stop button or turn off the computer and walk away, or they lean in.
I mean, there's a really awesome line from a movie that I really love. I'm a bit of a movie nerd, but
Okay.
Remember the Titans is a
Yeah,
fantastic movie, and
it is.
there's this line where you have these kind of two formal leaders on the team that are representing one's representing the black players and one's representing the Caucasian players,
Okay.
and they're having this kind of very physical representation of like the inner turmoil of the team, and it's they're
Okay.
talking to each other in the hallway, and each of them is pointing their fingers at the other side, quote unquote, and talking about how the other side is doing this and the other side's doing that, and
Okay.
one of them goes, well, attitude reflects leadership. And
Mm.
so when you say, like, if you have advice for a leader whose team is,
Yeah.
showing up in ways that they're like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
More often than not, like, starting in the mirror is a good place, because
That's right.
what leaders find interesting, their people find fascinating, and how they show up and comport themselves is, their team is going to look at them and go, oh, that's how you become successful, is you
Yeah.
fill in those blanks. And so, if your team is having issues or showing up in ways that you don't like, a good place to start is to make sure that you're not modeling some behavior that they're adopting because they are looking to you
There
for
you go.
guidance.
You just said
Uh,
the M word. I was waiting.
uh-oh. Which M word did I say? I was just talking.
Modeling. Modeling.
Modeling. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, do you find, how often does the leadership modeling of behavior come up in your conversations?
Oh my goodness. All the time. And because it's really because it's absent.
Oh man, it's so
Honestly.
sad to
Yeah. I did
it.
a webinar on preventing burnout, and I had a
Mhm.
stress expert on there with me. And one of the things I talked about with leadership was you have to set the stage if you want people to practice work life balance.
Mhm.
So if you're working 60-hour weeks and you're staying late and you're sending emails to them at 10 o'clock at night, and
Mhm. Mhm.
right, how do you expect them to understand how work life balance should be, acted out in life? Like, how, I mean, they don't understand. You're not showing them anything. So if you start taking your lunch and actually eating lunch, if you stop sending emails after 6 o'clock, just a bunch of different things that you can do. But it's all about modeling. And I think a lot of people don't realize the example that they're setting for their team.
No, and I think what's even worse is that not worse, because I do without diving too far into like societal woes and root cause of where this is
Yeah,
all
yeah,
coming from, but like I think that there is this deception that leaders will tell themselves where they will say, "Well, I don't expect my people to do that. I'm different."
yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
this "I'm different" thing is not because of your title. It's because you're in a position. You're different, not because there's anything special or wonderful or spectacular about you. You're still just a person.
That's right.
But the only thing that's different about you is now that you're responsible not just for your own actions, but you have some culpability or responsibility for the actions of the people who choose to follow you. If they're your lead, if you're their
That's right.
leader, they're choosing to follow you. But if you're
That's
their
right.
boss, which means that you are their manager, which is not necessarily the same thing as a leader, but you're their boss, they're
Yeah,
taking their behavioral cues from you. And so
from you. That's right.
rules for me, not for thee doesn't really work in a hierarchical situation. And it
That's
especially
right.
doesn't work if you have earned the mantle of leadership from your team. It
That's
doesn't
right.
matter how much you tell them that you don't expect them to be answering
Yeah.
emails
Yep.
or you don't expect them to be working on weekends. If you're
Right.
doing it, they're doing it.
That's right. That's right. Well, Wes, this has been such a valuable conversation. The idea that culture isn't some big abstract, concept, but something a team can actually take ownership of together is
Mhm.
exactly what I think leaders need to hear right now. So I just want to thank you for being on the show today.
Cheryl, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I am excited to see you continue your success in what you're doing and
Thank
finding
you.
ways to that we can make this world a better place.
Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, can you tell me where can you tell the people where they can learn more about you and the work you do?
Yeah, I think you can find me on LinkedIn. Obviously, I do a lot of writing there.
Great.
Culture Stoke is the name of the company that I run with my awesome business partner Marty. You can find us at culturestoke.com.
Great.
Um, and yeah, you can get the book on Amazon or on Audible if you have a wobbly table. I recommend the physical copy because it makes a good balancer of tables. But no, I mean, if listeners liked what I had to say, I'm always down to hop on and chat, even if it's not in a podcast form, because I really do care about this, and I am insanely passionate and a huge people nerd. So reach out.
Excellent. And I will have all of your information in the description area below the video. Thank you to my
Awesome.
listeners for tuning in to the Learning League podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more valuable conversations on learning and leadership. Now it's time to take it home. One thing that really stood out to me from my conversation with Wes is that culture doesn't change because someone gives a great speech or holds a difficult meeting. It changes when people decide they're willing to show up differently, and that's exactly what happened with Wes's team. Here's what I'd add. I've seen organizations invest a whole lot of time trying to fix culture, but they often stop after the conversation. Real change happens when the behaviors people commit to are reinforced, and that could be through onboarding, coaching, recognition, and don't forget accountability. Otherwise, it's only a good conversation that people eventually forget. So as you think about your own team this week, don't ask yourself whether you've talked about culture. Ask yourself whether you've built it into the way your people learn, lead, and work together every day. If you found a way to create this kind of lasting culture and you'd like to share your story, I'd love to have you on the Learning League podcast. Reach out at learn2engage.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next conversation. Until next time.